ჯეიმს ობრაიანი, რომელიც გახლავთ თავმჯდომარის მოადგილე Albright Stonebridge-ის ჯგუფის. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for talking to me.
And my first question, NATO's strategic concept drafted by Secretary Albright. I want to ask about it. What needs to be adjusted about?
Well, the main point of the strategic concept was to revitalize NATO and make clear that it would defend its own territory and work with its partners. And I think we've seen real progress in recent years with the exercises, the training, the greater communication between among NATO members, particularly on NATO's east, and also with states like Georgia who have aspirations to join NATO. So that part is going well. I think we did not identify exactly how states would move forward from aspirant status toward membership, and I think there more communication could be used now.
Yes, and Georgia conflict with Russia, occupied territories, how to remove this as a roadblock for the NATO integration process?
Well, I think actually NATO integration and the broader European project of Georgia's really lies in Georgia's hands. I think with real reform here and progress toward putting European values in place on the civilian side and on the military side, I think then everything becomes possible. The history of NATO's enlargement and of EU enlargement is that the states wanting to join demonstrated with patience and resolve their readiness to come in. It took time in many cases, and I think that's the situation with Georgia now.
It is your first visit in Georgia? Or?
No, I come to Georgia, I try to come at least once a year, and I'm impressed by the amount of progress that's been made over the recent years. Obviously, people are so energetic and entrepreneurial. What they need is to have a strong democratic institutions that let them go forward with the lives they want to lead.
And reflection on NATO. Have you had imagined at the time Balkan countries joining NATO and EU? What would be your message to Georgian public?
Well, I think it's a great example of how this takes time, but it can happen. At the time of the Dayton Agreement, almost 20 years ago, there was no consensus that the EU would reach out to that region or that NATO would reach out to that region. And it took 4 or 5 years after the final Kosovo conflict before the EU said there was a prospect for those countries to join the EU. NATO began to take membership applications a few years after the wars, but it took a long time before states were able to join those institutions. And it took patience and it took diligence by those states to do the work to be ready to come in. And I think that's the story here. So what I'd encourage Georgians to do is work on building the institutions at home so there's real reform, so that people in power are accountable in the same way that people are when they don't have power.